The 3 words that shattered my marriage weren't whispered in a tearful late-night argument or confessed in the sterile quiet of a therapist's office. They weren't even scrawled in a note left on the kitchen counter. They were broadcast live to over 50,000 people, complete with the upbeat intro music I composed myself and a chipper pre-recorded ad for a mattress company. The words were, "I'm with Leo," and I was the one producing the show. I was sitting right there, in my sound-dampened control room, behind a thick pane of soundproof glass, headphones clamped over my ears, watching the love of my life detonate our 8-year world as a piece of curated, monetized content. This is a new channel with incredible stories daily. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Alex. I'm 34, and until that precise, stomach-dropping moment, I would have described myself as a happily married man, one of the lucky ones. My wife, Clara, was the star, not just of my life, but of her own rapidly growing universe. She was a podcaster. Her show, The Unfiltered Self, was more than a job. It was her passion project, a sacred space she'd built, where she explored vulnerability, authenticity, and the messy, complicated truths of modern life. I wasn't just her husband. I was her most ardent supporter, her producer, her sound engineer, and the guy who had single-handedly spent 6 months of weekends converting our damp, spider-filled basement into a professional-grade recording studio. I'd researched acoustics until my eyes burned, learned to balance XLR cables, and mastered the subtle art of using a digital compressor to make her voice sound as warm and intimate to her thousands of listeners as it did to me when she'd whisper in my ear at night. I loved every second of it. I loved her, and I believed fiercely in her message, in her relentless drive to connect with people on a deeper, more meaningful level. My own work as an architectural draftsman was precise, logical, and quiet. Her world was a whirlwind of emotion, chaos, and noise, and I cherished my role as the stable ground she could launch from, the silent partner who made sure her voice was heard loud and clear. We were a team. That's what I truly, deeply thought anyway. The episode that would change everything was teased for weeks. Clara was practically vibrating with a nervous energy I hadn't seen in her before. "This one's different, Alex," she told me over dinner a few nights before the broadcast, barely touching her food. "It's the most honest, raw thing I've ever done. It's terrifying." I reached across our small kitchen table and squeezed her hand, my thumb rubbing circles on her skin. "You've got this," I said, my voice full of the genuine, unwavering pride I always felt for her. "Your listeners love you because you're real. Whatever it is, they'll be with you." She gave me a strange, searching look then, a flicker of something unreadable that crossed her face for just a second. I mistook it for fear of judgment, the normal anxiety of a creator preparing to lay their soul bare. Now, looking back, I know it was something else entirely. Guilt, perhaps. Or maybe a final, desperate, silent plea for me to see what was standing right in front of my face the whole time. The day of the live broadcast arrived. It was a Thursday, and I remember the late afternoon light slanting through the high basement window, catching dust motes, dancing in the still air like tiny, silent omens. Clara was pacing back and forth in the recording booth, a small, soundproofed room within a room. She was sipping her lemon and ginger tea, a pre-show ritual meant to soothe her throat and her nerves. She was wearing the forest green cashmere sweater I'd bought her for her last birthday, the one that made her eyes look like sea glass. She looked so beautiful and so fragile, and my heart swelled with a protective love. I gave her a thumbs up through the glass. She smiled back, a quick, tight stretch of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. I chalked it up to pre-show jitters. "Ready for sound check?" I asked into the talkback mic, my voice calm and professional. She nodded, took a deep, shuddering breath, and leaned into the expensive microphone I'd saved for months to buy her. Her voice, smooth as velvet, came through my headphones. "Testing. 1, 2, 3. The truth will set you free. But first, it will piss you off." It was an old Gloria Steinem quote she loved, an impossibly ironic choice, in hindsight. We went live at 7 p.m. sharp. The familiar, plucky jingle I'd composed on my keyboard filled my ears, followed by the ad for the mattress. Then, Clara's voice took over, seamlessly. "Welcome back to the Unfiltered Self," she began, her tone perfectly steady, practiced, and intimate. "Tonight, we're not talking to a guest. We're not analyzing a trend or breaking down a news story. Tonight, we're talking about my truth. A truth I've been hiding from everyone, including myself, for a very, very long time." I leaned forward, my fingers instinctively adjusting a knob on the mixing board, a proud smile spreading across my face. This was it. This was the vulnerable, powerful, brand-defining content that set her apart from everyone else. I was ready to hear about a struggle from her past, a childhood fear she'd conquered, something that would make me love her even more for her strength and resilience. But the story she began to tell wasn't from her past at all. It was about her present, our present. She started talking about feeling invisible, about a quiet, gnawing longing for something more, a spark she felt had been extinguished by the slow creep of comfortable routine. My proud smile faltered. My mind raced, trying to find another explanation. She's talking about her old corporate job, asterisk, I told myself, the one she hated. This is a metaphor. It had to be. We were happy. We had just booked flights to Italy. We'd laughed ourselves to sleep just the night before. But then her language became sharper, more specific, slicing through my desperate denials. She spoke of being trapped in a beautiful cage of comfort, of a love that was kind and stable and safe, but not electrifying. Each word was a small, sharp pebble hitting the thick glass between us. My stomach began to twist into a cold, hard knot. The headphones, usually my favorite tool of the trade, suddenly felt like an instrument of torture, piping her betrayal directly into my brain, bypassing all my defenses. The 50,000 anonymous listeners, represented by a climbing number on the screen, faded away into nothing. It was just her, in that brightly lit booth, and me, on the other side of the glass, watching in stunned silence as she systematically dismantled our life, story by story, for her audience. She talked about the thrill of a secret glance across a crowded room, the illicit electricity of a stolen conversation, the intoxicating feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, which had been so confidently and precisely gliding over the mixing board just moments before, were now frozen, hovering uselessly above the controls. She looked right at me through the glass, her eyes wet with tears, her expression pleading. It was a performance, a confession, and a desperate cry for validation, all wrapped into one seamless, devastating package. And I had a choice. A split-second choice. I could have slammed the big red emergency stop button, cutting the feed instantly, and filling the airwaves with dead silence. I could have stormed into the booth, ripped the headphones from her head, and demanded to know what the hell she thought she was doing. I could have created a scene, a real, ugly human moment, instead of this polished, one-sided narrative she was weaving so expertly. But I didn't. I just sat there, paralyzed by a shock so profound it felt like my entire nervous system had been flash-fried. What would you have done in my place? Seriously, write it in the comments. I need to know if I was a coward for letting her finish. And then she said his name. It started with a coffee, a simple conversation with a man named Leo. And I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't live a lie anymore. Leo. Not some abstract stranger, not a faceless symbol of her midlife dissatisfaction. Leo. Our friend. Our good friend Leo. The guy who had helped me carry the heavy sheets of drywall into the basement to build this very studio. The guy we'd had over for barbecues a dozen times, whose apathetic girlfriend we'd often gossiped about after he left. My mind fractured, replaying the last year in a sickening, high-speed montage of newly illuminated moments. Leo's hand lingering on her back for a second too long at our New Year's party. The inside joke they shared that made them both laugh a little too hard, cutting me out of the moment. The way she'd started dressing up. More for running errands, which I now realized coincided perfectly with his afternoon gym schedule. The signs were all there, a whole damn constellation of betrayals I had been too blind, too trusting, too pathologically content to see. The naivete felt like a physical weight, a stone in my gut, crushing the air from my lungs. I wasn't just a fool, I was a willing participant in my own deception. I had built the goddamn stage for her affair's grand reveal. She kept talking for another 10 minutes, but the words became a meaningless, humming buzz in my ears. She was wrapping it up now, her voice thick with practiced emotion, talking about the importance of radical honesty, about choosing her own happiness above all else, about the excruciating pain of hurting someone you love, but the greater pain of betraying your own soul. It was a beautiful, compelling speech, a masterpiece of self-justification, packaged for her audience as an act of transcendent bravery. The live chat on the screen I'd foolishly left open was a waterfall of comments. Some were overwhelmingly supportive. "You're so brave, Clara. Living your truth is everything." Others were furious. "You're doing this live? What about your husband?" But it was all just noise. The only thing that was real was the profound, echoing, cavernous silence that was growing inside of me. And then it was over. The outro music, the same happy, plucky jingle from the beginning, began to play. It sounded grotesque now, a cheerful, vapid soundtrack to a tragedy. The red, live light on the console blinked off. The connection to 50,000 strangers was severed. And it was just us. She slowly took off her headphones, her hands trembling. She looked at me, her face a mask of tears and terrified hope. What did she expect? That I would walk in, wrap my arms around her, and tell her I understood? That her unfiltered self was more important than our vows, our history, our home? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything she might have expected. In a slow, deliberate motion that felt like it was happening to someone else, I reached up and took off my own headphones. I placed them carefully on the console, next to the now silent microphone faders. I pushed a single button, and the bright studio lights in the recording booth went dark, plunging her into shadow. Then I stood up, turned my back on the window, and walked out of the basement. I didn't run. I walked up the stairs, my heavy footsteps the only sound in the suddenly silent house. I grabbed my car keys from the ceramic bowl by the door, my wallet from the entryway table. My phone, lying next to it, was already buzzing incessantly, a frantic, vibrating chorus of texts and missed calls from friends and family who had been listening. My sister, my best friend, my mother. They had all heard it. They had all been front-row spectators to my public execution. My old life was over, and a new, terrifying one was beginning. If you've ever felt like your world was turned upside down in an instant, stick around for the end of this story and maybe think about subscribing. It helps to know you're not alone in the chaos. I drove to my brother's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were bone white. I didn't turn on the radio. I couldn't bear the thought of another human voice, another performance. The next few days were a blur of numb disbelief. I was a ghost in my brother's guest room. From the living room I could hear the canned laughter of a sitcom, a sound so aggressively normal it felt like a personal insult. The rhythmic clanking of the dishwasher in the kitchen, the muffled sound of my niece practicing piano, these small, ordinary symphonies of family life felt like they were coming from another planet. The constant, angry buzzing of my phone on the nightstand was the only thing that felt real, a persistent reminder of the uniquely public nature of my private pain. A normal breakup is a private agony. You can retreat into a cave of your own making, lick your wounds, and tell your story on your own terms if you ever choose to. But my heartbreak was a trending topic. It was content. Complete strangers were debating the ethics of Clara's confession in comment sections and on Twitter. Some were hailing her as a feminist icon, a woman brave enough to shatter a comfortable, patriarchal lie. Others were calling her a malignant narcissist, a monster who had used her platform for an act of supreme emotional cruelty. I was a supporting character in the viral drama of my own life. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that was made worse by being public? It's a strange, uniquely modern form of hell, and I felt completely, utterly isolated within it. A week later, we had to meet. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown, a place with no memories attached, no ghosts in the corners. She looked tired, her eyes puffy and ringed with red. She slid a cardboard box of my things across the table. A few books, a favorite t-shirt I'd left at her side of the bed. She tried to explain, her voice a reedy whisper. "I didn't know how else to do it, Alex," she said, her voice cracking on my name. I was so scared. I felt like if I didn't say it out loud, to everyone, I would lose my nerve. I would stay in the comfort and lose myself. It wasn't about hurting you, not intentionally. I listened. I sat there and I listened. I let her say all the things she had probably rehearsed in the mirror, that it wasn't my fault, that I was a good man, the best man, that she would always love a part of me. It was all the classic breakup rhetoric, but it was hollow, meaningless, eclipsed by the searing memory of that glowing red live light. Finally, when she was done, when the well of her justifications had run dry, I spoke for the first time. My voice was quiet, eerily steady, devoid of the rage I thought I would feel. It was just empty. "It wasn't bravery, Clara," I said, looking her directly in the eye, forcing her to hold my gaze. "Bravery would have been telling me to my face in our living room. Bravery would have been dealing with the messy, unpredictable, private fallout of your own actions. What you did that was branding." I saw a flicker of indignation in her eyes. The artist being told her art was just a product. "You turned our marriage into a dramatic season finale for your show. You didn't just leave me. You produced my humiliation for an audience." Her mouth opened slightly, a protest forming on her lips but dying before it could find voice. "You used my pain as a stepping stone for your career, and you wrapped it in the pretty language of empowerment to make yourself the hero of a story where you were the villain. Do you think I was right to tell her that, or should I have just walked away in silence and kept my dignity?" She had no answer. Her defiant posture collapsed. She just crumpled, her face dissolving into tears. But this time her tears didn't affect me. The curtain had been pulled back for good. I couldn't unsee the performer. I paid for my untouched coffee at the counter, stood up and left her sitting there in the wreckage she had built. It's been 6 months now. I sold my half of the house to her. From what I hear through the grapevine, she and Leo live there now. I hear the podcast is more popular than ever, that the confession episode went viral and landed her a lucrative book deal. I wouldn't know. I've never listened to another second of it, and I never will. I moved into a small, quiet apartment across town. I packed up all the sound equipment from the basement I built and sold it online. With the money, I bought a new set of woodworking tools. I spend my evenings now not in front of a glowing mixing board, but in a fragrant cloud of sawdust. I build things. Desks, chairs, bookshelves. Solid things. Real, tangible things that you can touch and feel. There's an honesty in wood. It is what it is. It doesn't pretend. The rich scent of cedar and pine has replaced the sterile hum of electronics in my life. The process is slow, deliberate, and quiet. And with every joint I fit, with every surface I sand smooth, I feel like I'm rebuilding something inside myself. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust someone so completely again. The very idea of unfiltered vulnerability now leaves a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. My healing is my own. It's happening slowly, in private. It's not for sale, and it will never, ever be broadcast. What are your thoughts on this? Was it a brave act of public vulnerability or a profoundly selfish one? Is there a line between sharing your truth and exploiting someone else's pain? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments. I read all of them. Your perspectives really do help.